Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Beth Burke, and this is my LinkedIn Live show called Becoming More Than Your Title. If you haven't met me, I am a researcher and leading expert on hybrid professionals. Now, the word hybrid has become very popular recently, but it has so many different meanings. And I've been studying hybrid professionals even before the world went hybrid with COVID. Now, a hybrid professional, in my definition, is somebody who works at the intersection of multiple professional identities and actually integrates them together. So, if you think of having two existing things, when they get combined, a whole new thing comes out of that intersection. Well, that's what's been happening in the workforce with people and their professional identity. They've been writers, authors, designers, salespeople, marketers, engineers, you name it. But when they collect all these different talents or have multiple areas of expertise, they're not just doing many things. That's a multi-talented or multi-passionate or gig worker. There's a lot of names for that. People that have many areas of interest and expertise can actually combine them into something new, and that's where the hybridity comes in. So I do this series to reveal stories of people who are hybrids because it's hard to understand what it looks like and feels like without hearing stories from other people. Today, my guest is Jonas Altman, and he's coming to us from Vancouver, Canada. And I'm really excited to dig into his story because he has one of those nonlinear career paths. He's done a lot of different things in his history, and he is trying to express, who am I as the writer, the coach, the teacher. He's got just so many different parts, and he's really fun to listen to. So I'm going to bring Jonas up on stage so we can dig into his story. Hello, Jonas. Welcome.
Hi, Sarah Beth. I'm loving the countdown. I was gonna bust through the curtain and be like, "Hello, world."
We should do that next time.
And then I have to have a monologue, and it's like, okay, so a guy walks into a bar. No, okay.
I know this is early for you, so whatever it takes to get the energy flowing, I'm all for it.
Okay.
Well, I am so excited to have this discussion. You and I met on Clubhouse, ironically, which has been a great stomping ground to meet people from all over the world. And you and I just kind of connected, and we were talking about identity and profession. I was like, please come on my LinkedIn, and here you are.
Yeah.
So let's start the stage with you. And what do you do? So tell us, how do you answer the what do you do question?
Yeah, beautiful. I first of all don't ask the question. I ask, what are you working on? It opens up a whole wealth of possibilities. But to answer that question, the tagline is, I help make work more human. And then I do that showing up in the world as a writer, a coach, and a teacher. And then I actually thought about this more of like, no, what do I really do? Like, okay, like tell me. And I have conversations, often difficult, challenging, transformative, hopefully, with people in the hopes that they unlock their potential or get out of their own way or start really living and working in the way that they want, which brings me joy. So that's enlightened self-interest. And it's all an aim of human flourishing. And I think I remember when I said to myself, what would it look like to get paid to learn? Because I had met some people who kind of did. And I was like, that's not a job. But in many ways, I created that over the last decade where I'm learning, and we talked about this before we jumped on, as the inputs that are coming in are so juicy that I feel like it's my duty to translate them or synthesize them and share them in my own way. So that's my hats. And I probably have more hats, but those are the ones that fit right now.
Yeah, this is getting really good already. I love how you say you start by, not asking people what they do, but, what they're working on. Is that how you framed it? That's beautiful. I've heard people also say, what problems do you solve? But I like your framing a little better. And then I'm really curious about this phrase you just used, that you make work more human. I think that's how you said it. What does that mean?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's an assumption there, right? So Schools and businesses were made or created or designed in the image of a machine.
Mm.
And from the Mad Men era of the 50s, or even maybe before that, as knowledge work became more and more prominent, and then exploded with the internet, and now with blockchain or whatever technology you're a fan of, the organizations and our schools and many of our systems are outdated, and they're inhuman. They don't allow for ourselves to be our full selves. So it's actually rehumanizing the workplace.
Oh my gosh, loving all of this because I'm a fan of new language and terminology, and you just took human to inhuman and unhuman to rehuman. I'm like, yes, this is good stuff.
Well, I've stolen optimal distinctiveness, and I've rocked it. And most people don't necessarily jive with the term, but they jive with its meaning of being your individual and asserting yourself and syncing to the tribe and finding that dynamic and creating a culture, whether it's an organization or a community or a dinner party, where you don't have to lose your sense of identity.
Yeah,
I love that when you share that with me.
Well, I want to come back to that and just quickly shout out Rosalind is here and she's enjoying the conversation. She's got a bunch of emojis of laughing, I think, at our intro. So glad.
We'll just pretend that Rosalind's like the only one. So we'll just
I love it. So what Jonas was just referring to, I did a post recently called optimal distinctiveness. And it's a term, I think, coined by Marilyn Brewer. So if people Google that online, and it is a sociology concept of standing out and fitting in simultaneously. And I think it has an echo for people that are hybrid professionals, because on one hand, the issue is you want to fit into the workforce. You're like, I can do the marketing, the sales, the product design, all of this. But then on the other hand, you need to stand out because you're trying to differentiate yourself and be like, well, I rock it at my product design, sales, marketing, all this, but I'm using all the same words everybody else is. So how the heck do I stand out? So the optimal distinctiveness level is finding the balance. And I believe people who are hybrids, because I coach a lot on this, finding your hybrid title, which is what you call yourself to name your hybrid identity. So I'm getting a little in the weeds, but my hybrid identity is being a creative disruptor. And it's a unique label that isn't, just generic, because I'm an artist, researcher, educator, designer. And the creative disruptor is my way of standing out so I don't just sound like everyone else. So all kinds of tools and tricks. But I actually think you have a hybrid title that I want to dive into on your website. At jonasaltman.com, it says you're a workologist. What is a workologist?
Yeah, it was funny because I did a workshop, like I was a participant, and the provocation was very similar to yours, different language. She's in Berlin and she helps companies. I mean, in many ways, the marketing language is a lead magnet. So it creates a thing in the brain that's like, what is that?
That's novelty. That's my other post.
Right. That's what our brain is wired for, novelty, especially today. So she was like, I mean, I'm trying not to swear these days based on, but I had blank disturber as the term I was using. And she was like, ooh, I like that. And I was like, I think that's what I like doing. And it's probably what maybe I would hope that someone might say of like the pirate, the maverick, the catalyst has a place, but often it creates tension or rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah.
And when I got enamored with this idea we had been talking about before, about work that can be a place and a source of energy, I just went on this like tour around the world talking to people who looked like they got lit up, whether it was product design, art, engineering, law. And I, in effect, indoctrinated myself as a workologist without having the term.
Yeah.
And the workologist term is actually a New York or New Yorker article, a column that ran for many years, which was career advice. Okay. And then it went defunct. So when I was writing my bio for my book, the publisher loved it. And they were like, we're using it. And I was like, really? So yeah, and I'm still trying it on. I feel like it fits. But when you study, say, ethnography or archaeology or sociology, at some point then you might say you're an archaeologist, but a workologist in many ways is anyone who I believe, who enjoys the study of work, has a passion and maybe even a purpose to unlock human potential in the workplace.
I think you nailed the definition. I mean, the beauty to me of hybridity is taking two existing things like ologist and work and putting them together and you get a new thing.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're playing with or using this label about yourself, sincerely or insincerely, depending, it really is a hallmark of like, you are someone who bridges and is a boundary crosser and plays between spaces. So I want to push into this notion of hybridity with you. Have you ever heard about hybrid professionals before we met?
Oh, I've been thinking about this. So I've heard of hybrid cars and I've heard of centaurs, half people, half horse. And then I watched your TED talk, and I've been in the clubhouses with you. And I think I had to expand my mind to go beyond two, to see intersections, and really exploring this idea of working identities, that just because you were an engineer and now you've moved into a lead role or technology lead role doesn't mean your engineering self dies.
Right.
And that is the way I've encountered it, but you've given it sort of a umbrella and a way, or perhaps a currency for people to lean into it instead of being like, you're a generalist and we don't need that. And one of these shows I was listening to said the best advice they could give a young person is to go and work for a charity, because you're going to have to be a hybrid by definition. You will do marketing and HR and events, hiring and firing. You'll be doing web design. And the next thing you know, you're probably pretty good at a lot of things, which is not a bad thing to be when you're 22 years old.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is kind of a radical new mind shift. I'm noticing that a lot with people where they think they get it, and then I push them and I prod, and then they're like, oh, there's this intersectionality piece I didn't sense before. And I hear this a lot from entrepreneurs because they are the quintessential I wear a lot of hats position. If you are a founder, CEO, you are running all the teams and departments. So you're the hybrid in theory. But I push against that a little bit more, because in my own sense of a hybrid, it's where these different identities no longer have boundaries. You're not just like, I'm just doing marketing right now, and now I'm going to switch gears. There's no switching gears. You're completely in a space where everything's fluid and interconnected, completely fused. I think it's good to use products like a hybrid car where you're like, it's gas electric. It's not really either or. I also have been thinking about fruit. Apricots and plums have been crossbred, and now there's the apricot plum and the pluot. Oh. Do you know this?
No, I like this.
Yeah. So I used to love pluots. I lived in San Diego. They had great farmers markets. And I was like, what the heck is a pluot? I saw it at a farmer's market. And they're like, oh, it's this new kind of apricot plum, and it tastes great, and it's fruitier, and it's less of the plum and more of the this. I was like, okay. And sure enough, it has a whole different taste, but its look and feel has the apricot plum, like, you know, it's born out of that. That's what's happening with our professional identity. If you're in a career for a couple of years, or you're job switching, or you have side gigs, however you are in your work, people that are suddenly completely seamless, like you don't know what to call them anymore. Because so I gave this in my TEDx talk. This one guy, Justin Gitlin, is like a computer programmer, developer, a gaming artist, a musician, all in one. Like you have no job title that would ever fit him. And his creations are the sum of all of that creativity and design and computer knowledge. And I'm hearing that with you with the workologist. So let's talk more about what your hybridity looks like and feels like. I'd love to hear how you're thinking or experiencing that.
Yeah, that's a very generous question. I wonder if, in some ways, for people who are really wired for novelty, like you and me, there's a necessity to destruct and rebuild and reinvent as a way of being or a way of moving through the world, which is exhausting to a lot of people. It's like, okay, I studied, I got my gig or my job, and statistically, according to Stanford, that's 2 out of every 10 people that kind of decide and have a sort of linear-ish. So 8 out of 10, 80% of the world are either ripe for hybridity or many reports will say have somewhere between 9 to 10 jobs by the age of 30 and possibly 4 to 5 careers in their lifetime as a fact, like
I've seen
not
that.
up for discussion.
Yeah.
So if you even believe that, and that 40% of the working world is already filing more than one employer on their tax return, we are in the age of hybridity.
Yes.
So for me, it's almost like, hey, bro, or hey, dudette, get out of my kitchen. Like I've been here for 20 years. I started my company in 2003. So what I mean, 18 years. But at the same time, it's really refreshing because it's kind of saying there's a new way of working, which is much more like the Hollywood model of networked, about value and creating value, about unleashing more of the person in terms of their uniqueness and their idiosyncrasies and their quirks. And so for me, I mean, my first career was in the music industry, so I still DJ and collect vinyl records. So facilitation, whether it's facilitating conversations or learning experiences, has it could be a reality distortion field, has a version of DJing in it where you get to either perform or play music, but it's of a different sort. And then entrepreneurship allows for both you to put creative ideas in the world and see if they land much more quickly than, say, an institution like a university.
Yeah.
But the risk factor is a lot higher. So there's a lot of people who are adverse to risk, and a lot of people who are much more higher risk, and a lot more people who feel intimidated, and other people who are already doing it and not asking for permission. So I think that that's very healthy to see that people are willing to fail in public or learn and think in public and grow, and as opposed to being a private affair. So for me, I think it shows up now, as I had said to you, of mostly conversations that challenge me and my thinking and put me in a learner's mindset or a beginner's mindset, or I try to adopt that. And then taking what I learn and putting it into these buckets of writing about it, bring it into my teaching, or offering it as a suggestion or as a provocation in a coaching conversation.
Yeah. So what I heard from that is, one, you're one of those people that's programmed for novelty.
Yes.
And so you're highly curious, but you're also someone who's a synthesizer because you're bringing in all of this information from different places, especially because you've been in some entrepreneurial settings. And then the way you bring it back out into the world is writing and coaching and teaching about it so that they can make sense. So you navigate being in between by maybe being between people and ideas to translate and share and move around that way. Does that feel like your hybrid space?
Yeah, well, if you like geek speak, it's the liminal space.
I love geek speak.
Right? Yeah, so we're on the threshold of I don't thrive inside the organization. I don't necessarily thrive making art alone in a studio. I mean, writing a book for 4 years in many ways was making art, but it was for 2 or 3 hours a day. And I'd come out and play. I don't think that I'm the type of person that wants to choose. And so that's been difficult for me to have to reinvent myself or figure out, okay, like I'm the incubator person, like we had talked about, and help pollinate or create ecosystems. And that's attractive. And it was exciting. And then 4 or 5 years into it, it's like, oh, look at that. There's something else over there. There's organizational design. And instead of just leaving and springboarding, what you're offering a lot is kind of accepting and including and then expanding with that skill set or that capability, and not saying I'm done with gardening and now I'm into cooking. It's no, gardening and cooking are really related, and now we've got, social psychology, whatever the hybrid is.
Totally.
So yeah.
How do people perceive you? I'm following the tentacles. Like I can see you being this maverick that's moving in and out of spaces, but what about on the other side, people that you work with? How do they perceive who you are and what you do?
Well, I spent way too much of my life caring what people thought. And now as I get older, I just don't have the time. Most people are thinking about themselves most of the time. So to think that other people are thinking like, oh, is Jonas wearing a black shirt or a white shirt? Like that's a stupid thought. So meditation and TM which has been a savior for me, gets me out of my ego and goes like, so what? Like, so that's a learning opportunity or a growth opportunity. And actually, I'd ask you to rephrase the question or restate it because I have another thought. So just ask me again.
My question was, how do other people perceive you when you are someone who is so adaptable and kind of chameleon-like, that you're shape-shifting depending on what you're doing with who you're doing it? So how do other people see who you are in your work?
That's why it got me thinking. So we come back to optimal distinctiveness is I've lost my sense of self as a people pleaser to sync to the tribe and conform and subordinate who I am to fit in for so long. And then I was like, my coach says, basta, like I'm done, which is another Spanish term, which we can use, but everyone should know that. And I think my energy, if that's the right word, and there's a whole lot of theory about relational energy, which is scientifically proven that toxicity in the workplace is a disease and it will infest the organization. People will bring it home and then bring it back to work.
Yeah.
Flourishing or eudaimonia or allowing people to be themselves or more of themselves, which we've been seeing over the last year and a half, is like compound interest for the soul. So it's my energy that is the stream between, okay, is Jonas playing the facilitator, the coach, the writer? I don't care. I'm me. And it's about owning it, to your point. And if someone feels good about saying that you're a doctor or that you're a woman or that you're, what do you call people from Denver?
Denverites.
A Denverite. Yeah, exactly. Knock yourself out. Like,
this is so good, Jonas. You're going deep into like identity research. I don't know if you even know.
Here's another one, which I love. It's a book called Working Identity. When you are abandoning or leaving one working identity, which is change, you are losing something. You are grieving something. Yeah. And most people want to try on other working identities before they make the switch. And you see it mostly, say, on LinkedIn. When does that switch go from employee to founder? Yeah. When does it go from product marketer to engineer? And it's like literally a mindset shift of I just finished a coding boot camp, or I just got the job and I'm going to update my LinkedIn. Does that actually, like, is that embodied? Is that a lived experience, or is it something that's more about optics?
Where I was thinking, what you triggered for me is external versus internal validation.
Yes.
Perfect. That people don't believe enough in themselves. They don't have enough self-confidence and I am this other thing, but they want to be in it. So they have to go get a certificate or take a class or have somebody else like give them the fairy dust and say, now you are, go be it. And a lot of the work I've seen with hybridity is you decide, like, if you want to call yourself a creative disruptor and own it, go out in the world and own it and be whatever that is, define it yourself. And people will follow you once you sound like you own it.
Yes. I had a student in a coding boot camp, and I didn't have them. They were a student. I happened to be brought in to work with them to be employable. And I remember they said, I think I need to learn more JavaScript. And I sat there for a second. I was like, excuse me, am I mistaken that you just spent 3 months learning it? They're like, yeah, but I've got to finish this module on Coursera or Udemy, and then I'll apply to Amazon or whoever. And it was really about confidence and competence. Yeah. And maybe they were right. Maybe they did need to skill up in order to feel that they could answer that question in the interview authentically. But from where I'm standing, that's the fake it till you make it, and also having the ability to learn on the fly. And if you know that you have the wherewithal and the resilience and the capacity to like grow on the job, then, you know, most HR people are getting 60 or 70% of what they put on their spec. So go for it, get the job, get the interview, and then go and, you know, spend a weekend on a crash course.
So I want to play with an idea here with you. I think storytelling is a super underestimated ability that is actually more important than so much of the other things we tell people they need. Because if you can tell the right stories about yourself and who you are and what you do, it is kind of the fake it till you make it. But if you tell your story well enough and you believe it, then people will open these doors for you or new opportunities will come. Have you seen storytelling have certain effects? How do you use that in your own experience?
Yeah. I saw these two young guys, like 20 years old, in London with a company called Shuffle Hub, which was like online shopping, like Net-a-Porter and ASOS for men. Because they're like, men is an underserved market. It was mostly wives and girlfriends that buy stuff.
Yep.
And they pitched at TechCrunch and they got 100K with a story. They had no product.
Yep.
And I was like, wow. I was like, okay, so that's the power of presenting and communication, which is going to the amygdala. It's doing something. It's creating a sense of the most ancient form of language.
Yeah.
People remember stories.
Yeah.
I've seen it with people who use interlocking stories, who have 2 or 3 stories, and they weave them together, and that becomes much more profound than having a script or an agenda. And I've seen it with people who either as a revisionist, including myself, by leaving things out or by dramatizing or amplifying certain things, create the essence of what's needed in that moment to transform, convince, sell, or so forth. I mean, if anyone watches Glenn Gary and Glenn Ross, that's the power of selling, which is transformation and convincing. Now, because everyone's always selling, and selling is a human endeavor, like you're selling yourself to your kid to be the father or the uncle, or you're selling the kid saying, I want my allowance so I can go buy, or wants his Bitcoin allowance to go buy candy or buy stocks. He's actually requesting, and the story could be Joey has been getting paid in Bitcoin, and now he's got $47,000. Why? How about me? Like, what, don't you want me? That and I'm seeing it all over the place, and it's no longer really taboo to use storytelling, not as manipulation, but with authenticity.
Well, and that was the distinction I want to make. It's not trying to misconstrue yourself or just pitch yourself with empty promises. It is more about telling a story in order to amplify qualities about yourself you're trying to represent. So bringing this back to the identity piece for a moment, I think like when I've worked with a career coach or a resume writer or, discussed career development with people, I don't hear them talk about storytelling. They talk about, let's map your professional history. Let's look at your metrics and your deliverables and your KPIs and just all this stuff about like your achievements. But when I work with people that are in my book, I call them emerging hybrids. They don't fully understand their hybrid professional identity yet. They're sort of in this limbo, this liminal of like, I know I'm not just a jack of all trades, but how do I show my hybridity as my unique value? And what I've found, the tool they need is the storytelling. How do your identities fit together? If you can't express and point to evidence of, well, here's the reason why I'm an artist and a designer and a researcher simultaneously, because it enabled me to do blank, blank, blank for this organization, and no one else was going to see that or do that. Boom. Now that story made sense of you for your audience. So there's something wrapped up there, I feel, that's not obvious to me in career development, that I think is the tool people are searching for. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there are people who are storytellers and they usually go into brands and charge bigger bucks. But for a coachee to actually want and be receptive, and the coach to say, okay, let's get your story down, write it in an email, post it on LinkedIn, post it on Instagram. Let's do a mock interview or a client pitch, I think would be a wonderful thing.
Yeah, because, intersectionality is a tricky conceptual thing. And if you can't concretize it, if you can't give direct evidence, I mean, I've talked with you this morning, but we haven't really gotten into like, what do you do when you are in this, facilitator, coach, writer, entrepreneur space? And that's the messiness of it. It's like, well, how do I even describe it? And so I work with people a lot to figure out, okay, what are the case points? Like, how are we proving the hybridity as a value? Do you have any stories that you're thinking of that show how you are intersectional in your ability?
I mean, I think about actually like, fluidity and adaptability and resilience being so sexy for people in the last while, but always. And like yesterday, so I mean, philosophers, writers, poets, artists have been walking for centuries, for thousands of years, as a being outside wasn't you left the home to go outside. You were outside all day and then you came home. You were walking. You know, Nietzsche, I can't say his name, wrote many of his books by walking. So I started thinking about where I do my best work, and it's not at work. It's walking, running, surfing, and talking, like things like this, this is work-ish.
Yes.
So the more I am generous with myself in terms of rest, cross-pollination or cross-training of not doing the writing and not doing the coaching, but doing the complement or the inverse, the better I find myself in terms of my attention, focus, and energy to be a good coach or to be a more intentional writer or a more inclusive or relevant teacher, if those are like adjectives.
Yeah.
So what I'm finding is that the idea of even thinking them as isolated is dangerous.
Right.
And not even getting concerned with how, back to your question about being perceived, but understanding that if you write to think, then maybe you meditate and run to not think. And then when you're teaching, you're actually thinking on the fly and kind of getting feedback and seeing if some of these ideas land or resonate.
Yeah.
And by not doing one, like I've been saying, maybe I'll stop doing that and stop doing that. You actually are basically cutting off a limb, or if you're half man, half horse, you're cutting off your legs. Yeah. So I feel like that's what I was saying about the hats are fitting better. Funnily enough, I'm really enjoying gardening and plants, especially because I live in Vancouver and there's nature everywhere. So maybe another version of me gets more into gardening, and tending to the garden is a metaphor for human flourishing. Is like, well, there's this thing. That's what the world needs. It needs more gardeners and people who are looking at ecosystems and organisms. So yeah, so for me, it's like, I don't even have the story I tell myself, whether it's delusional or not, it couldn't be any other way. And if someone wants to challenge me, which I'm open for, I can say, if it serves you to think of yourself as in a linear way of I studied, I graduated, I got a job, I then moved to this complementary or better company, that is now rare. So I'm not alternative. You're alternative, and good for you. I mean, I wish I have a friend who was a Crown prosecutor in Vancouver, and we go for runs. He's a marathon runner, and he says, you know, it's really exhausting putting criminals in jail all day. And I was like, I imagine so. He's like, it's quite emotionally exhausting. Yeah. And I was like, but you're cut out for it. Like, that's who you are. And he was like, yeah, but I kind of wish I was just like, whatever, anything else. Like, he wanted to do a spin studio with his wife. And I was like, yeah, spin studio right now, probably not the best business. We bought a Peloton, but I love those conversations with some of my friends who are so far from me, and they embrace the oddness or the quirkiness, which is not a negative. No. People perceive it as, oh, you're weird, you're odd. My nephew says, oh, you're weird. I'm like, good. Like, that's good. Being different is an asset. Diversity, cognitive diversity, is the currency, has been the currency for good business for a long time.
So many points in there I'm trying to hold on to in my head. Sorry, no, it was great.
My coffee kicked in. It's 8:38.
Yeah, literally. We had a coffee moment. I want to go back to a word you said earlier that I think you were hinting at just now, is embodiment. Like, I think you are bringing all these different parts of yourself together and you embody it. And that's part of the hybrid power. And the statement you said about cutting off your legs or cutting off parts of yourself, if I couldn't do the writing anymore or the thinking or whatever, that is very true to hybrids, because as a hybrid, you're a composite. And so if you have to let go of one of these primary identities that are so important to you, you literally are cutting off part of your identity. And nobody wants to do that. It feels miserable. And when people are forced to, they don't stay in that job long, or they move on, because the urge for fulfillment and being their whole self is more powerful than staying compartmentalized.
Yes.
But yeah, I feel like you and I have a lot of synergy just in our philosophies of life and work, and then the work we've done. So I'm just feeling a lot of resonance in the examples you're giving. I feel like we could go really deep on this one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's something to say. There's people like you and me, and probably many people who are going to watch this, who have tasted toxic or difficult, for sure difficult, but we could say even inhumane work environments.
Oh, yeah.
And then therefore decided I don't want that anymore. Like, that's not for me. It could be a brilliant jerk as a boss. It could be blah, blah, blah. There's a whole new generation that have not experienced that, have created a life or a working life that's nourishing, and are like, why would I go and do that? And I've met them. Like, I met the PPR person from Buffer, which is the social media scheduling app, and she has never had a job in an office. She's been there for 7 years. She's a media and communications graduate. And I was like, I have no idea what it would look like to not have tasted. It would be like the forbidden fruit, for tasted something, which is allowing that. So there's a sort of maybe a new collective consciousness to say there doesn't even have to be having the negativity to have what we have, which to me is very exciting. Whereas I think a lot of people in their 30s or 40s have definitely had like experiences in environments, and often just the whole company as itself, that's not really living their purpose or embodying what it is they stand for. And millennials or Gen Zs are like not even engaging with them because they can smell it from afar.
Well, I think we're opening up a whole area of work and organizational development, and really, Heather McGowan calls it the human capital era, and valuing and investing in your talent because they matter more than any other part of the business. And yet they've been sort of put to the side as like just one other line item, and they're not. So I want to pause here because I actually think maybe we have a sequel to unpack in circumstance, because so much good stuff. Jonas, where can people find you if they want to follow up? Are you?
They can drive to, they can fly, they can walk to Vancouver.
Yes, I'm coming.
And come into nature and go for forest walks. They can go to jonasaltman.com. And from there, they can go explore my hybridity.
Yes, I just got on your email list, so I expect a lot more.
Yes.
And if people are curious about hybrid professionals, you can grab my book, More Than My Title. Go to my website, morethanmytitle.com, and follow me on social at More Than My Title. This has just been a huge pleasure. I'm loving Clubhouse for the fact that it brought us together. And I really, really want to talk to you again and hope we can meet up soon, maybe someday even in person.
Oh, yeah. I'd love it. Thanks.
Okay. Jonas, thank you. Anything final words before we go?
Oh, I actually wrote down,
Okay.
You said, what is a key thing you want to leave about my professional journey? And I said, lean into it, celebrate it. There's only one you, and you are awesome.
Ooh. Lean into it and celebrate it. Great words I'm going to take with me. Jonas, thank you. We're going to finish it today. Thanks.
Bye.